My father had not spoken a word in 23 months and 4 days when a young woman in a borrowed cardigan walked into the day room at Willow Lane and sat down at the upright piano nobody had touched in a year. I was there. I had been there nearly every Sunday afternoon since the stroke. I am telling you this because I want you to understand before I tell the rest that I had given up. I had given up the way a daughter gives up, not all at once, not loudly, but slowly, week by week, by learning to stop expecting my father's eyes to find mine when I came through the door. My name is Margaret Halloran. I am 58 years old. My father, Thomas, was 82. The young woman's name was Caitlin Reyes, and she was 26. It was a Sunday in late February. The Willow Lane day room was the color of weak tea, beige walls, beige carpet, beige curtains pulled half across the long windows. 6 residents sat in the half-circle of armchairs facing the television, which was playing a nature program about coral reefs with the sound turned almost off. My father was in the chair nearest the window, where the staff always put him, because before the stroke he had been a man who needed to see the sky. He was not seeing it now. He was looking at the carpet between his slippers, and he had been looking at the carpet between his slippers, in one form or another, for nearly 2 years. Caitlin came in with a clipboard and a folder of sheet music under her arm. I had not seen her before. She introduced herself to the duty nurse at the desk. She was a music-and memory volunteer, she said, sent by the local conservatory's outreach program, here for the trial sessions the family meetings had agreed to last month. The nurse pointed at the piano in the corner, the one whose lid had been closed so long that the dust at its hinges had set into a kind of gray scab. "It hasn't been tuned in a while," the nurse said. "Will that be a problem?" "I don't think so," Caitlin said. "It's all right if it isn't perfect, it only needs to be honest." She put her clipboard down. She crossed the room to the piano. She paused with her hand on the lid and looked around the half-circle of armchairs as if she were greeting each resident silently in turn. Her eyes landed on my father a half-second longer than on the others. Then she lifted the lid. I will tell you what I expected. I expected her to play something cheerful and brisk, the kind of activity program music that we family members have learned to smile through. "You Are My Sunshine," "Daisy, Daisy," something to fill the air and let the staff write something in the chart. What she did instead was lay her folder on the music rest, open it to a page I could not see, sit down, and ask, in a voice pitched low enough to carry only to the half-circle of chairs. "My name is Caitlin. I was told a little bit about each of you before I came. May I begin with a song for someone? Mr. Halloran, Thomas, I was told you used to dance. Would it be all right if I played a waltz for you?" I held my breath. My father did not move. He did not lift his eyes from the carpet. The duty nurse, who had been about to return to her station, paused and looked at me. I did not know what to do. I nodded. Caitlin laid her hands above the keys, took a quiet breath, and began to play the tales from the Vienna woods. I want to tell you what that waltz was to my father, because if you do not know, none of the rest of this story will be what it ought to be. I will keep it short. I will not make a movie of it. But it is the hinge on which the whole afternoon turned, and a hinge will not work if you do not name it. He had met my mother at the spring assembly at the Garrick Hall in 1968. She was 19. He was 23. They had not been introduced. The band had been playing the tales from the Vienna woods, and my father, who could not yet dance and had been telling himself for 3 weeks that he would not, walked across the floor in his rented black tie and asked my mother to teach him. She laughed. She taught him. He stepped on her shoes for the entire first chorus and got it perfectly right by the second. They were married 14 months later. They danced the Vienna woods at their wedding, at every anniversary, on the kitchen tiles after dinner the night my brother was born, and one last time in the hospice room the week before my mother died, when she could no longer stand and he held her in the chair and hummed the melody into her hair. He had not let it be played again in his hearing since. We had buried her with the Vienna woods on the chapel organ, and after that, when the song came on the radio in his car, he would turn the radio off. My brother and I had spoken to the family meeting about it. The note was in his chart. The note had been in his chart for the 11 months he had been in Willow Lane, and not one of the activities staff had ever sat down at the piano and played it, because the note said, Not the Vienna woods, it is too painful, please. I do not know how Caitlin had read the chart. I do not know if she had read it at all. I have asked her since, and she has told me only that she had spent 20 minutes with the binder of resident notes before the session, and she had stopped at my father's page longer than at the others, and she had thought, the way she sometimes thinks when she is choosing music for someone she has never met, that the door we are afraid of is sometimes the one we have been waiting 2 years for someone to open. She rested her hands above the keys for a moment, breathing the way singers breathe before a long phrase. The day room had been the kind of quiet that is not really quiet, the murmur of the television, the small mechanical sigh of a heating vent, the cough of a resident 2 chairs down. All of that fell back a step. The duty nurse, who had picked up a clipboard, set it down again. The Sunday afternoon light through the half-drawn curtain laid itself across the closed lid of the piano, across Caitlin's hands, across the front of my father's slippers, and held its place. She played the first bar. The piano was indeed badly out of tune. The middle C was nearly a quarter tone flat, and 3 of the high keys had stopped sounding entirely. None of it mattered. Caitlin played the waltz the way you play a waltz when you are trying to remind a room of something, not perform it. Slowly, almost conversationally, she let the bass notes settle under each phrase like a hand on a shoulder. I was watching my father. I had been watching my father every Sunday for 23 months and 4 days. I had memorized the way he was not there. At the 3rd bar of the Vienna woods, his right foot moved. I do not mean that it twitched. I mean that it lifted slightly off the carpet and came down once, twice, 3 times in the slow, unmistakable rhythm of a man who has danced a particular waltz at least 500 times in his life, and whose body has not forgotten it even when the rest of him has been gone for 2 years. I made a sound. I do not know what kind of sound. The nurse at the desk looked up. Caitlin did not stop playing. She did not turn her head. She did one thing only. She leaned very slightly into the bass so that the rhythm of the dance was easier for an old foot to find. My father's left hand came up off the arm of the chair. He lifted it to about the height of his chest, and he held it there with the palm turned faintly outward, the way a man holds his hand when he is offering it to a partner. His eyes had not moved from the carpet. His mouth had not moved at all, but his foot was keeping the waltz and his hand was waiting to be taken. I got up. I was not thinking. I crossed the room. I knelt on the beige carpet in front of his chair and put my hand into his hand, the way I used to do at 4 years old when he would dance me on his shoes around the kitchen. His fingers closed. They were not the fingers of a man who had been silent for 2 years. They were the fingers of my father, the way I had known them my whole life, gentle and dry and faintly cool, with the small old callus on the side of the thumb where he had held a pencil for 40 years drafting buildings nobody ever told him were beautiful. Caitlin played on. She played the long second phrase, where the waltz rises and turns. The duty nurse had come quietly around the desk and was standing in the doorway with her hand over her mouth. The other residents had not moved. One of them, a Mrs. Doyle, who had been at Willow Lane longer than anyone else, was smiling for the first time I had seen since I had begun coming there. My father said something. He said it very quietly. It was not a full sentence. It was 2 words in a voice rusted out of use for nearly 2 years, and I had to lean my forehead almost against his to hear it. He said, "Eileen, play." Eileen was my mother's name. I will tell you what I did. I did not try to correct him. I did not say, "Dad, it's me, it's Margaret." I held his hand and I leaned my head onto his shoulder the way I had when I was small, and I said, "She's playing, Dad. She's playing it for us." He turned his face. He turned it slowly, the way you turn a face that has not been turned in a long time, and he looked at me. He saw me. I do not have the words for what it is to see your father see you again after you have stopped expecting it. There is no language for it. There are only the small mechanical facts. His eyes met mine, they focused, and he said in the same rusted voice, "Maggie." I cried. I cried the way you cry when something you had finished grieving comes back into the room and sits down beside you. Caitlin reached the place in the waltz where the dancers are meant to turn under each other's arms. My father's hand, which was still in mine, lifted slightly, and he gave my fingers a small, deliberate squeeze, and I understood. I rose. I helped him to his feet. The duty nurse had come behind the chair to steady him under the elbow, and between us we walked him 3 small steps onto the open square of carpet in front of the piano, and we turned very slowly in a half circle. We did not get more than the half circle. He was not strong enough. But we got the half circle, and the half circle was the Vienna woods, and when we finished it he held my hand against his chest the way he used to hold my mother's hand against his chest, and he looked at Caitlin and said in the same low voice, "Once more, please." She played it once more, she played it slower. He did not try to dance again. He sat back in the chair with my hand in his, and he closed his eyes and he listened, and his face did the thing I had been hoping his face would do every Sunday for 2 years and had given up on. It softened. It came back. He was, for those 3 minutes, my father. When the last bar settled, the room was very quiet. The television was still showing coral reefs with the sound nearly off. Outside the window, a starling landed on the railing. My father opened his eyes. He looked at Caitlin. "Thank you, dear," he said. "How did you know?" Caitlin smiled. She did not answer right away. She closed the music folder gently and rested her hands in her lap. Then she said, "I read the note in your chart, sir. The one that said, 'Please not this waltz.' I thought about it for a long while. I thought only you would know, sir, whether you wanted to hear it. So I took the chance of asking with the music itself and not with words. I am sorry if I was wrong." My father shook his head slowly. "Not wrong," he said. "Late." Then he looked at me, and his eyes were as clear as I had seen them in 2 years, and he said, "I have been waiting for someone to play it." I did not know how to ask. I told that sentence to my brother on the phone an hour later, and he was on a train within 40 minutes. He came in the door of the day room with his coat still buttoned, and his eyes already wet. My father looked up from his chair and said his name, Daniel, Daniel, and Daniel, who had not heard his name in our father's voice in 2 years, sat down on the carpet at his feet and put his head against our father's knee and cried like a small boy. Caitlin, very quietly, played the Vienna Woods a 3rd time. We stayed in that room until the staff turned the dinner trays into the hallway. Nobody told us to go. There is a great deal I could tell you about the next 8 months. I could tell you that my father, who had been silent for almost 2 years, never quite became a talker again. But he spoke a sentence or 2 each Sunday afterward and once or twice a song. And on his last good afternoon he sang a phrase of the Vienna Woods himself, in a voice you had to lean in to hear. And Caitlin was there, sitting at the upright with her hands folded, smiling with her eyes wet. I could tell you that the activities staff put the music and memory program on a permanent rotation, and that Caitlin came every Sunday at 3 o'clock, and that the day room at Willow Lane stopped being the color of weak tea and started being the place where the families came in early to find a seat. I could tell you a great many things. I will tell you only one more. The morning of my father's funeral, last October, Caitlin came to the church in a black coat that did not quite fit her. She came up to me at the door and asked if I would like her to play during the service. I said yes. I said, "Please." She sat down at the chapel organ. She had never played that organ before, and it was a fierce old instrument, and she had only 10 minutes to find its stops. And during the recessional, as my father's coffin came down the aisle behind my brother and me, she played the tales from the Vienna Woods. She played it slowly. She played it the way she had played it the first time in the day room at Willow Lane with the bass set like a hand on a shoulder. The whole congregation stood. They did not sing. There were no words for that hymn. They stood and they listened, and a great many of them wept. And my brother and I walked our father out into the autumn light to the slow, honest rhythm of a waltz my parents had been dancing together for 57 years. I am telling this story tonight because Caitlin asked me, very gently last month, whether I would. The conservatory's outreach program is trying to expand. They are trying to put a piano in every dementia ward and a young volunteer beside it. They need money. They need attention. They need the people who decide such things to understand what one young woman with a borrowed cardigan and a folder of sheet music can do in 3 minutes in a beige room for a family who had given up. My brother and I have spoken often, since the funeral, about what happened in the day room that February afternoon. We have tried, more than once, to settle the question of how a young woman in a borrowed cardigan, who had never met our father, could have known to play the very song his chart had asked her not to play. I do not think we will ever settle it. I do not think Caitlin herself can quite explain it. What she said to me the last time I asked her was this: "Some doors people put a sign on. The sign says please don't open. But sometimes the sign is on the door because the person inside doesn't have the strength to open it from their side anymore, and they are hoping, very quietly, that someone outside will read the sign properly and come in." I have thought about that sentence every day since she said it. I do not have a clever ending for you. I have only the picture in my head, the one I will keep for the rest of my life. My father, in a chair by the window at Willow Lane, lifting his left hand off the armrest and holding it out, waiting for a partner he had not danced with in 2 years, and a young woman at an out-of tune upright leaning into the bass so that an old foot could find the rhythm. If you have ever loved someone the music left silent, please, find them their waltz. Find them the young person who is willing to play it. And when she sits down, sit down beside the chair. Take the hand that comes up. Whisper that the music is playing. Then wait and listen and let the music do what only the music can do, which is to walk into the room where words have stopped working, and to hold out its arm, and to say, very simply and very honestly, "May I have this dance?"